He arrived at the restaurant dressed like a man ready to bless his son's future. Shoes polished, back straight, heart full. But the moment he stepped inside, the room stared back with a truth colder than winter steel. There was no wedding here. And when his son finally appeared across the empty dining room, his eyes didn't show joy, only fear. One sentence shattered 30 years of sacrifice. Dad, we had it yesterday. A father who gave everything. A son who erased him. A marriage built on wealth that neither bride nor groom owned. And a truth so massive it would flip the entire family's world upside down. Some betrayals break trust. This one woke up a sleeping giant. If anyone has ever mistaken your kindness for weakness, if anyone has ever pushed you out of their life and thought you would walk away quietly, then stay with me until the end. Because this father did not just step back. He stepped into the shadows and rewrote the entire game. He arrived at Pier 59 the way a father should arrive at his only son's wedding. On time, dressed with quiet dignity, carrying a gift that represented a lifetime of sacrifice. His suit wasn't expensive, not compared to the ones his son now wore, but it was clean, pressed, and chosen with care. The envelope in his jacket wasn't just money. It was 30 years of sweat woven into a single moment. A moment he'd rehearsed in his head 100 times. His father the groom toast, his blessing, his pride. But the restaurant didn't share his anticipation. The hostess blinked at him with polite confusion. Good evening, sir. Reservation. Henderson wedding, he said, smiling faintly. Father of the groom. She checked her book once, then again, and when she lifted her eyes, something in her face had changed, something that tightened the air around him. So, there's no wedding here tonight. For a second, he thought he must have misheard. His ears closed around the words like a vice. No wedding? That couldn't be right. He had the date written down. He confirmed it months ago. He'd been counting the days. Then he saw him. His son emerged from the bar area, straightening his tie as if trying to hold himself together. His steps faltered when he recognized a figure near the hostess stand. For a moment they simply stared at each other across the empty dining room, father and son suspended in a single, shattering silence. When John finally approached, his voice was small, almost boyish. Dad, what are you doing here? What do you mean? He whispered. Your wedding, John. 7:30. Tonight. A muscle in the young man's jaw twitched. He avoided his father's eyes. Dad, we had it yesterday. Yesterday. A single word that hit harder than any betrayal his ex-wife ever delivered. 30 years of raising him alone. 30 years working 2 jobs. 30 years saving every cent so his son could have a life his mother walked away from. All of it dismissed with one word. Yesterday. He felt the envelope inside his jacket. The cashier's check, crisp and heavy. $1 million. His son's first inheritance. Money that suddenly felt poison in his hands. We had to change the date, John continued. Victoria's family had some scheduling conflicts. It was last minute. Just a small ceremony. He nodded slowly, the air around him turning cold. I see, he said, keeping the envelope where it was. Well, congratulations. Dad, I wanted to tell you. But you didn't. There was no anger in his voice. That made it worse. Disappointment lay silently between them, heavy enough to crack marble. His son shifted his weight, uncomfortable with a quiet strength he'd never understood. He toned, walking toward the exit with careful calm, the check still burning in his pocket. If his son thought he was walking away defeated, he was wrong. The old man paused at the bar, ordered a scotch he barely tasted. The bartender, unaware he was standing in the middle of someone else's heartbreak, asked, celebrating something, sir? My son's wedding, he answered. Apparently. The bartender blinked. Did they have a ceremony here? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because the truth was beginning to crawl into his bones like an unwelcome guest. The date wasn't the only lie. There was something deeper, something calculated, something that explained the months of distance, the canceled dinners, the hollow excuses. And the restaurant confirmed it. No wedding yesterday, the bartender said. We haven't had one in weeks. So it hadn't just been secrecy, not just shame. It had been strategy. He dialed his son, voice steady. John, Where was the wedding? Pier 59 says nothing happened here yesterday. Silence. Thick, stretching, suffocating. Finally the answer came. The Union Club. Of course. Manhattan's oldest social club. A fortress of old money. A place that weighed net worth the way other places weighed birth certificates. A place that wouldn't let a security guard step foot past the lobby. Not without suspicion. Not without judgment. So when did he decide to change the venue? He asked. It wasn't my choice. Victoria's grandfather insisted. You know how families like hers are with tradition. He knew exactly how families like Hayes operated. He'd watched them for decades. The way they walked, the way they spent, the way they looked down their noses at anyone who kept their buildings upright and safe. Then came the blow that sliced deeper than anything yet. Dad, Victoria's family has certain expectations. They needed to know I wasn't marrying into instability. And having, a security guard at the head table sends a certain message. A security guard. Not his father. Not the man who worked through holidays, who wore the same boots year after year so his son could have new shoes for school. Not the man who saved money in silence so his son could graduate debt-free. No, a security guard. What message would that be? He asked quietly. That we come from a background that might raise questions, the son whispered. Our background. 30 years of honesty. 30 years of honor. 30 years of breaking himself in half, so his son wouldn't know hunger. And now it was something to be hidden. He thought again of the envelope in his pocket. $1 million. And he realized he had been ready to hand his son something precious, while his son had erased him. He ended the call. Slowly, deliberately, the bartender filled his glass again without asking. Family trouble, he guessed. No, the father said softly. A family revelation. He didn't know yet that this was only the first fracture, that the truth about the bride would bring the walls down, brick by brick, that inherited shame ran deeper than he imagined, that his son's life, his job, his apartment, his marriage, was built on lies neither of them fully understood. But he knew enough. He knew that when love is repaid with humiliation, something inside a man sharpens. He finished his drink. He stood. He walked out into the Manhattan night. And as a cold wind hit his face, he whispered the first thought of the transformation that would follow. He has no idea who his father really is. The morning after the empty restaurant humiliation, he woke with the kind of clarity that only betrayal can carve into a man's bones. He wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger was loud. What he felt was quiet, cold, and strangely methodical. The sort of stillness a man experiences when he spent a lifetime being underestimated and suddenly realizes a game has shifted. He brewed his coffee the same way he had for 30 years. Same mug, same silence. But the questions that poured into his mind were new, sharp, and unwelcome. How does a son forget the man who raised him? What kind of woman encourages that? What kind of family rewards erasing loyalty? He didn't have answers. But he had instincts, and those instincts had kept him alive through every hardship, every betrayal, every stretch of empty pockets. Wealth hadn't made him wise. Survival had. He opened his laptop, not to check emails, not to distract himself, but to investigate. He typed the bride's name first. Victoria, a name meant to soften suspicion. A name meant to sit politely beside the word privilege. But the digital world had a way of telling stories people didn't want told. And her story didn't fit anything his son claimed. Her judge father, no public record. Her family foundation, no website, no board listing, nothing but a single stage gala photo. Her social media, curated down to the bone, too perfect to be real. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. She wasn't a daughter of old money. She was a daughter of reinvention. That explained her obsession with image, her fixation on status, her need to reshape John into someone he wasn't, and erase a man who had shaped him into everything he was. Still, instinct wasn't enough. Evidence was the only language people like her understood. So he called in a favor. He hadn't spoken to Ethan in years, not since they'd worked night shift together in the early days, when both were young, hungry, and certain life owed them nothing. Ethan had left the security world and built something sharper, private investigations, corporate digging, asset tracing. The kind of work that peeled masks off people who preferred the dark. Long time, Ethan said when he answered. What's wrong? He didn't waste time. My son just married into a family I need to know everything about. Send me the name. Victoria Hale. Claims her father is a judge. Ethan exhaled. Give me 48 hours. He only needed 12. The call came just after sunset. You sitting down? Ethan asked. Should I be? I'd recommend it. He sat at the kitchen table, the same one where his son had once done homework, once complained about algebra, once asked innocently if being poor made people less worthy. Ethan continued. Her father isn't a judge. Never was. Never close. He's a contractor, barely solvent. He filed for bankruptcy twice. A slow, heavy pulse settled behind his ribs. And the mother? A receptionist. Nice woman on paper. Works paycheck to paycheck. So the whole family is fabricated, Ethan finished. They built a social facade so clean it passes at a glance. But it's hollow. He closed his eyes. Hollow, like the restaurant, like the excuses, like the son who now carried another person's ambitions on his shoulder. And there's more, Ethan said. Your daughter-in-law, she did research on you. Something colder than anger slid down his spine. Research. Address history. Employment records. Property filings. She looked everything up before she even met your son. The old man stared at the table, vision blurring for a moment. So she targeted us. I'd say she targeted your son, Ethan corrected. But you were an obstacle, one she needed to minimize. Erase was a word. Not minimize. Erase. His fingers curled on the table's edge. And her debt, he asked. Ethan hesitated. She's drowning in them. Student loans, credit card balances, even a personal loan that's months behind. She married a lifeline, not a man. He felt something shift inside him then. Firm, immovable. Not rage, not heartbreak, but resolve. Send me everything, he said. Within minutes the files arrived. Pages of confirmations, screenshots, documents that stripped away every illusion his son had been living under. The truth wasn't just messy, it was weaponized. He knew he had to talk to John. But first, he had to understand the extent of the manipulation. So he called his son that night. John, tell me something honestly, he said. Did Victoria ever ask about my job? His son hesitated. Then, too quickly. No. Why would she? He almost laughed. Why would she? Because she needed to know how deep the well ran. Did she ever ask about my finances? No. Did she ask about my building? This time the silence was heavier. Dad, she knew you owned the building where my firm leases space. She assumed, you were a landlord. Nothing more. So that was it. The bride believed she married into a modest family with a modest building and a father who spent his life in a uniform. She assumed wrong, but he didn't want to fight. Not yet. He needed the full picture, and the picture was uglier than he expected. Dad, John whispered finally, don't make this harder. Victoria just wants us to present well. Her family has standards. And I don't, he asked quietly. The question landed like a blow, because for the first time, John didn't have an answer. That told him everything. Once the call ended, he didn't reach for a drink. He didn't pace. He didn't lash out. He simply closed the laptop, shut off the lights, and let the dark settle around him like armor. The humiliation at the restaurant, the lies, the bride's manufactured pedigree, the son's shame in his father. They were no longer isolated wounds. They were the beginning of a pattern, and patterns, once recognized, could be dismantled. Before he went to bed, he whispered something into the silence of his apartment, words that felt like the first step toward a storm. No mask survives the truth forever. The third chapter of this unfolding tragedy didn't begin with confrontation or fury. It began with a number, a simple line on a bank statement, a transfer, a pattern he had almost forgotten, because fathers sometimes forget the weight of their own generosity. $5,000 every month for 8 years. The old man stared at the banking app on his phone like he was looking at a ghost. There it was, dozens of deposits sent religiously, never late, never questioned. Money he gave without fanfare, without expectation, without ever reminding his son who carried him through adulthood. John had always insisted it wasn't necessary. John had also always accepted it. Funny how money tends to be invisible until someone decides its origin is embarrassing. He scrolled further. Rent transfers, insurance payments, tuition, deposits marked book fees. Even a few marked emergency, sent at 2 in the morning during John's college years. His jaw tightened. All this time, his son hadn't just distanced himself. He had built his life on silent help and somehow still found the audacity to be ashamed of the man who provided it. The betrayal wasn't only emotional. It was parasitic. But what turned a quiet humiliation into a brutal awakening was a realization that everything his son believed he had earned had come through his father's hands. The law firm where John worked, the sleek office he bragged about, the elevator with a brass trim he compared proudly to his wife's grandfather's building. He owned the building. He had bought it 10 years prior, quietly, using a trust formed long before John was born. He'd chosen not to interfere in his son's work life. He'd allowed him to believe he rose on his own merit. He never once visited the office, never once bragged, never once reminded him. He wanted his boy to grow without the shadow of a wealthy father. He wanted him to believe in his own strength. And yet here they were. His son drowning in borrowed pride, married to a woman drowning in borrowed identity. He drove to the building late one night. The streets were mostly empty, the city humming with a low thrum of distant traffic and neon buzzing. He parked across the street and simply watched the entrance. The glass doors reflected him faintly, an aging man in a modest coat, hands tucked in his pockets, face calm but eyes burning with the weight of a truth he hadn't planned to unleash. 10 floors up, lights were still on. Associates working late, paralegals eating desk dinners, cleaners pushing carts. A building alive with ambition. And at the very top, on the floor his son used each day, a nameplate gleamed in polished brass. He hadn't seen it in person before. Henderson and Co. His name. His son's name. Their name. He whispered under his breath. You built a life on my shoulders, son, and now you pretend not to know the spine that kept you standing. He didn't blame John entirely. Not yet. Manipulation has a way of staining everything it touches. The next day, he called Ethan again. I need one more thing, he said. The bride's financial ties. Personal and family. Ethan didn't ask why. He knew the tone. The low, steady timbre of a father who has crossed the threshold between patience and necessity. Give me a few hours, Ethan replied. He came back with everything. Victoria's debts had ballooned past $180,000. Her father owed close to $90,000 in legal fees alone. Her mother's credit card had been flagged twice for suspicious activity. Their luxury home, rented. Their foundation, a one-time event held in a leased ballroom to appear philanthropic during engagement season. And the final punch. Victoria had met with a family attorney 2 weeks before the wedding, asking what rights spouses had over inherited property. He stared at the papers for a long time. It wasn't love that drew Victoria to his son. It was calculation. A step on a ladder she couldn't climb alone. But John didn't know that. John was blinded by affection and illusions of belonging to her family's world. A world that didn't exist. He realized then that if he confronted his son outright, it would fail. Humans don't break free from manipulation through arguments. They break free through reality, the kind that leaves no room for illusion. And reality was his specialty. So he arranged a meeting. Not with the son, not with the bride, with a lawyer, a different kind of lawyer. Her name was Margaret Lane, a corporate shark with a reputation so sharp the city whispered about her in boardrooms. She was not warm. She was not patient. She was not forgiving. Perfect. When she entered his office on the 32nd floor, his private office, the one his son didn't know existed, she looked him over for 3 seconds and smiled faintly. So, she said, sitting, you decided to stop being invisible. He nodded. I need protection. And I need leverage. You have both, she said calmly, but you don't realize how much you're holding. She spread the bride's financial documents across the table like a deck of poisoned cards. She thinks she climbed into wealth, Margaret said. She climbed into a storm. He leaned back in his chair. I don't want to destroy them. I want them to understand the truth. Destroying them is how they'll understand, the lawyer replied without blinking. His silence was answer enough. Margaret leaned forward. You're a good father, she said, but you've made one mistake for too long. What's that? You let them forget who you are. He knew what had to be done, not out of vengeance, not out of fury, but because the longer a lie lives, the more it demands to be fed. That night, he checked his bank transfers one last time. $5,000. Every month. 8 years. He stared at the latest payment, thumb hovering. Not angry. Not hurt. Resolved. He canceled the transfer. The system confirmed it with a single, emotionless notification. Transfer canceled. A quiet severing. A symbolic cut. The first thread pulled from the illusion his son had wrapped himself in. And the moment he pressed that button, something shifted in the universe. Silent, invisible, but irreversible. Because for the first time in years, his son would feel the absence of his father. The storm didn't begin with shouting, threats, or slammed doors. It began with silence, the kind that precedes an earthquake. The father waited, patient and still, knowing that certain truths reveal themselves only when the world is forced to live without the support it once took for granted. The call came sooner than he expected. Dad, John's voice cracked through the phone, anxious and strained. My rent didn't go through this month. Did something happen with your bank? It wasn't the rent John was worried about. It was a sudden collapse of a financial backbone he never acknowledged. That monthly transfer wasn't just money. It was a quiet architecture holding up his entire life. He didn't understand that until the day the floor shifted beneath him. No mistake, the father said evenly. I canceled it. The silence that followed was dense. Very dense. Why? You're a married man now, he said simply. You've built a new life. It's time you carried it. He could practically hear the blood drain from his son's face. Dad, things are complicated. Victoria expected. I know what she expected, he said, cutting through the loss of his restraint. And I know what she married. The son inhaled sharply. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'd like to meet you, the father said. Both of you. My office. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock. Your office. Confusion wrapped itself around the words. Yes, John, he said quietly. It's time you see where your father actually works. He didn't wait for a reply. He didn't need one. The next morning, the 32nd floor felt different. Charged. The skyline behind his glass wall office cast long reflections across the polished floor, and for once, he didn't shrink into modesty. He sat behind his mahogany desk in a tailored black suit he'd never worn around his son. Not to impress, not to intimidate, but to show the truth without apology. At 10:07, the door opened. His son stepped inside first, eyes widening as they took in the sweeping room, the meticulously curated art, the monogrammed documents, the skyline view. Behind him trailed Victoria, dressed in cream, chin tilted upward with a confidence too fragile to be real. Dad, John whispered. What is this place? My office, he answered. Welcome. Victoria's eyes darted across the room, calculating. She recognized wealth when she saw it. She also recognized the thing she feared most, power she hadn't anticipated. The father nodded toward the chairs. Sit. They did. He folded his hands on the desk. Let's begin with honesty. The pause that followed carved tension into the room. You didn't want me at the wedding, he said. You changed the date, changed the venue, and lied to me. And you let me show up alone to a building that had never even heard of your ceremony. John's face flushed. Dad, You thought I didn't belong there, he continued, because you believed I was a man who spent his entire life guarding doors. Victoria's lips parted slightly. She hadn't expected direct confrontation. The father leaned forward. But you never asked what were behind those doors, did you? Another silence. He allowed it to sink in, the weight of decades they had rewritten in their minds. John, He said, "Whose name is on your firm's lease?" John blinked. "The building owner, I guess. That would be me." The sun froze. Victoria's composure cracked like thin ice. He continued before they could recover. "You work in my building. You built your career in my building. You hold client meetings in conference rooms I remodeled." John's throat tightened. "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I wanted you to grow without counting my money," he said. "But instead, you learned to count other people's approval." He turned his gaze to Victoria. "And you researched me before you ever approached my son. You built an image of my life that fit your narrative, a narrative that made it easy to push me out." Victoria stiffened. "I only wanted what was best for us." "No," he said quietly. "You wanted what was best for your debts." Her eyes flickered. He slid the printed documents across the desk. Her loans, her family's bankruptcies, her fake charity gala, the attorney consultation she tried to hide. The color in her face vanished. "I don't care where you come from," he said. "I care that you lied. I care that you manipulated my son. And I care that you tried to erase me because I didn't fit the fiction you invented." John stared at the papers, horror creeping across his expression as he traced every line with trembling hands. "Victoria," he whispered, "is this true?" She tried to speak. The words came out thin. I was protecting us." "From what?" he demanded. "From my father?" "From truth," the father thought. "From reality. From the man who built everything you now stand in." He gave them both a long, measured look. "You know," he said softly, "my lawyer suggested I sue you for alienation of affection." Victoria's head snapped up so fast her earrings jingled. "But I'm not interested in destroying you. I'm interested in teaching you." John swallowed hard. "Dad, what do you want from us?" He'd thought about this, long and carefully. "I want you," he said to his son, "to understand who you are and who you come from." He gestured to the room. "All of this exists because I work for it, bleed for it, sacrifice for it, and I didn't do that so you could pretend to be someone else." His voice softened, dangerously. "I don't want gratitude. I don't want apologies. I want you to stop being ashamed of the man who raised you." A tear clung to the edge of his son's lashes. "And as for you," he said, turning to Victoria, "you will pay every debt you have, every last one, not with my son's money, and not with mine." The young woman flinched. "John," he said gently, "if you choose to stay married, that's your decision. But you will stay with both eyes open." He rose from his chair, slowly, with the gravity of a man reclaiming his throne. "You both may leave." They stood shakily. John hesitated at the door. "Dad," he whispered, I don't deserve you." He met his son's gaze with a look both firm and forgiving. "Maybe not yesterday," he said quietly, "but tomorrow is a different story." Victoria lingered for half a second, searching his face for softness she could manipulate. She found none. When the door closed behind them, the father exhaled, long, slow, and steady. The storm wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was controlled, precise, surgical. He had restored the balance, not by shouting, not by punishing, but by revealing the truth in a room built of glass and sky. As he stood by the window overlooking the city, he whispered a single sentence, a verdict, a promise, and a warning woven into one. "The man you erased is the man who saved you." He didn't smile as he said it. He didn't need to. The truth was enough.